increase the amount of soldiers to go there. We're going to throw up another 30,000. In the summer, there will be 150,000 soldiers in Afghanistan, and still another 100,000 in Iraq. He said the same thing. He said, you know, we're fighting against terrorists, so we won't have another attack, a 911 attack against us. This is a situation that we have to, you know, we have to be strong, and it's about our security and everything. Well, I think two things. First of all, if he wanted to fight terrorism, he wouldn't have a double standard, and he would like arrest people like Masada Kuriles, you know, who's the biggest terrorist in the Western Hemisphere, but he's a CIA terrorist, so he's okay. And he would release the Cuban Five, or 5 anti-terrorist fighters who are languishing in jails in the U.S. And so Obama has picked that tough wording to move forward. But really, what you can see in this period, there's actually been a mind shift. And they still have those images of Vietnam. You know, after Vietnam, when Reagan came in, he said he was going to like have this, you know, sort of a cleansing of the Vietnam syndrome, they called it. Because the U.S. lost it, but you wouldn't know it by reading history books, because you would think, you know, that it was still, that the U.S. had won, that it was, well, it was kind of a negotiated settlement. No. You know, the North Vietnamese army came crashing through the gates, and the U.S., the remnants of the U.S. were scampering away on helicopters. And that's the reality of it, but you would never know it. And they find themselves in a similar situation right now, is that they aren't winning the war. They're actually losing the war. You know, they're trying to say, well, you know, we've got the Taliban on the run and everything. And so they're doing these like sort of like dramatic leads up. You know, McChrystal and Petraeus said about the war, they said, you know, we're going to wipe them out. We're going to flush them out of their caves and all that. We don't hear them talking that way anymore. Now they're talking about, well, you know, if they could just sort of come around a little bit, we could, you know, go into negotiations. And Karzai, the U.S. puppet, he's even saying, well, you know, I could see a government where they would hear with us. So the thing about the U.S. is that they have no permanent interest, no permanent friends. They only have permanent interest. So if they can jockey a situation with the Taliban and be able to maintain their role there in their hold there, they would be more than happy. So I just want to talk about that a little bit. Is that in Marja, the whole attack there was this very dramatic buildup, right, where they sent 10,000 soldiers into the city in a very dramatic way just to grab it. Well, if they left Marja, believe me, it would go right back in the hands of the Taliban. That was similar to what they did in Vietnam, where they had the strategic hamlets where they would go in, hold the ground, and then they would leave. Now they're probably going to do the same thing on Kandahar, and what we think is that you know, that what they're doing is very similar to what Nixon did in 1972, where while they're at the peace talks, while they're trying to negotiate a settlement, that also what they're doing is, are you waiting for the lights?
That's good.
While they're you know, while they're trying to make their position stronger, you know, by pursuing a military attack, they know they can't sustain it. And it's just like in 1972 when, you know, when Kissinger was at the peace table in trying to negotiate a settlement, and the U.S. had pulled out because they knew they were losing badly because of the resistance of the Vietnamese, the complete breakdown in the chain of command where, you know, 50%, or 1 out of every 2 soldier in Vietnam had done some act of insubordination. And we're certainly not at that stage in Afghanistan, but you can see the potential. And the other thing that happened was a tremendous amount of opposition building in the U.S. and the huge demonstrations that were happening. So, you know, in 1972, leading up to it, it's signed, I think, in 1973 in June. But leading up to it, during Christmas of 1972, what did they do? They bombed the hell out of North Vietnam leading up to the peace talks. They had B-52s over Haiphong and Hanoi, just in big circles, just going around and around and around and around, and then just carpet bombing the north. And so they ended up signing a peace accord, but they thought that they were going to, because it was a decisive victory, but they thought that they were going to be able to, get a better deal. And that's exactly what's happening right now in Afghanistan, where they're hoping to cut a better deal. The U.S. is in an untenable situation where they can't win the war, but they can't leave either. So that's what the maneuvering is right now. There's not, when they talk, it's interesting when they talk about the Taliban, there's like 140 different armed resistance groups in there. Their whole rationale, once again, was, right, after 9/11 is, Al-Qaeda. Well, there's no Al-Qaeda there, There was no Afghanis on the plains, but they're able to pursue it on this great myth. And what they're thinking, what the generals are thinking is they don't want to, the ruling class is much more perceptive about history, and they understand, the Vietnam War. They know they lost it. But they painted it in such a way where they basically completely cleanse the collective memory of what went on there. And what's happening now, is they're kind of setting themselves up. In the back of their mind, they're seeing those, North Vietnamese tanks going through that gate into the presidential palace in Saigon, and they don't want a repeat of that. They're in a situation where they want to have a perception of victory, and try to get a negotiated settlement, because it's all about controlling the oil there. As early as 1996, Clinton sent over his Undersecretary of State, Robin Raffnell, and her whole role was, we're afraid we're going to lose out on economic opportunities, and those economic opportunities, of course, is the oil pipeline that could stretch up through Afghanistan into the former Soviet republics, the Caspian Sea, etc. And not to mention the other part of that is the hegemony, the political hegemony over the entire region. And so that's what they're trying to maintain, in some kind of settlement. In other words, a puppet government that would be in their best interest. Now, what we need to do, we're an activist organization. We're constantly thinking of new ways. And what we need to do is try to figure out how we're going to build a movement, how we're going to build a struggle, to make it untenable for them and their plans. And I think I'm going to stop there. I look forward to the other speakers and the questions and answers.